Over the past 2 weeks, I've been taking Big Mom to the store championships in my local area. And while I've topped in a lot of them, finally, yesterday, I was able to win this guy, the Winner Luffy card. So I wanted to just do a little deck profile showing off the list that I use and talking about some of the choices as well as sort of my mindset when it comes to playing Big Mom. Because obviously everyone's on the Katakuri train, but personally, and I know this is not backed by data, I think Big Mom's the better yellow leader. Okay, so maybe I don't think she's actually the better yellow leader, but she is more fun. So, without further ado, let's go over to the game mat. And yes, this is what my setup looks like. That's why I don't do a whole lot of in-person card deck reviews, because this whole thing, I'm trying to figure it out, slowly but surely. Oh, by the way, here is the deck list for everyone who wants it. And while I'm showing this off, I do want to mention that, I don't know if this is a disclaimer, but the Sword Championships that I won with this, it was a little weird in terms of the decks that were being represented there. But yeah, let me just tell you my matchups. So, Whitebeard, Katakuri, there was a lot of yellow representation there, which scared me. Red-Green Luffy, and then in the finals went to Iceberg. Alright, and like we've been doing for our deck profiles, we're going to start off with the core of the deck, and of course we have to start off with 4 copies of our Searcher, Charlotte Pudding, 1 cost to play, 2000 power, counter plus 1k, but on play you can look at top 4 and then grab either a Sanji or a Big Mom Pirate. Primarily, I want to see this in my opening hand, ideally, and if I don't have a Prospero, then I'm also looking for that. If not, I'm looking for one of my many Big Moms. Next up, we do have 4 copies of Prospero. This is your 3 cost to play, 5000 power, so a natural attacker into everything except Whitebeard. But on KO, he essentially gets to search top 3 for a Big Mom Pirate. So this is really good because you can get some really good aggression with it. And if it annoys your opponent enough, they'll have to do something about it, which gives you that ability to search. Now, this is a little bit problematic in blue because they can just bounce Prospero back to your hand, or even worse, to the bottom of your deck. So look out for that matchup. And then to go into some pretty obvious choices, 3 copies of 7 cost Big Mom. I like the ability to, 1, force my opponent to make some choices, whether they give me one, whether they take one away. And I like the fact that, she's essentially sole focused on legs, right? 8000 power is huge, really good to kind of do the setup of, put the Charlotte Lulin down. Usually on curve if you have 7 or 8, but if you want to even do it later, say at 9, you can do that, and then next turn go into your 10 cost Big Mom. And speaking of which, 10 cost Big Mom essentially does 7 cost Big Mom things, except both happen, right? So you get to heal yourself and your opponent has to trash a life. But as a late addition to what I think should be the core, especially in this meta, Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is super good. So 2 costs to play, you may trash 1 card from the top of your life area and then KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. But the trigger is KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. So if you can find this in life, you can essentially get that for free. And you know what's really good at putting things into life? Big Mom. Thunderbolt in life, whether it was just kind of randomly in there or I fixed my life to put it in there with the ability. This has saved me so many times, especially against, the Whitebeard matchups, anything with red that involves any of the Marcos. Great for KOing problematic stuff like opposing Charlotte Crackers, right? Now, I conservatively put 3 in here. I really debated putting a 4th. We'll see what happens with the future list, but 3 felt right for me. Next up, going into our essentials, we're going to start with the 2k counters. So first up, we got 4 copies of Strucin. This is a 1 cost to play, 1000 power, counter plus 2k. But on play, you may trash 1 card with trigger from your hand, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 1. So for the most part, this is a 2k counter, but I did have to use it sometimes, especially against Zoros or Whitebeards who were spamming out the buggies and the Izos, just so that they wouldn't get value off of being able to attack with them. I would try and KO them fairly early in the match. But honestly, the more important card of the 2k counters is Sanji. So 4 copies of Sanji. This is 2 costs to play, 3000 power, counter plus 2k. But Dawn times 1, when attacking, you may add 1 card from top or bottom of your life cards to your hand, and then add 1 card from top of your deck, and then put it at the top of your life card. So The way I sort of described it in my last Big Mom starter deck review is this is funky draw, right? Because you essentially get to draw one from life and then also recover one and heal yourself. And not to talk too much into the future, but this version of the deck used to run the Big Mom Enchanter and other homies like the Double Attack and Napoleon, and I would kind of do that. But I realized that the power of having so many triggers in my deck is that I can put them into my life, and so I needed more, I don't even know what you call this effect, life cyclers, and I think Sanji is a great life cycler. Next up on the essentials, 4 copies of Charlotte Brûlée. This is 3 cost to play, 1000 attack, counter plus 1k, but has a blocker keyword. And trigger, play this card. So I wouldn't try and play this too many times, except for in matchups where they were being maybe a little bit more aggro and I thought that I could get the block off. But really, I'm trying to, if I see this, put this into the top of my life so that it can be played relatively for free. Next up, 2 copies of Charlotte Cracker. So this is 4 cost to play, 5000 power, counter plus 1k. But Dawn times 1, if you have less cards than your opponent, this character gains double attack and plus 1000 power. Also trigger, you may trash a card from your hand to play this card. And I think the real beauty of this is that it forces your opponent to need to respond, right? To be able to block or to counter. And at 7000 power ultimately, if you get this off, that's kind of a really nice hit. That said, I am not entirely relying on the double attack or the aggression when I'm playing my matches, which is why it's only at 2 of, mostly because of the other 4 costs that we have in here. 4 copies of Daifuku. So this comes from the starter deck. This is 4 cost to play, 5000 power, counter plus 1k, but Dawn times 1, when attacking, you can add a card from top or bottom of your life to your hand, and then add 1 card from top of your deck to the top of your life cards. So essentially, once again, funky draw. This is very similar, I mean, actually the same as the Sanji. And once again, the value is I have so many trigger effects in my deck. I want to be able to see them, and this allows me to do that in even more ways. And then last up for the essentials, I do have 2 copies of Ikaku Sovereignty. This is a 2 cost to play counter event. Up to one of your leaders or characters gains plus 5000 during this battle. But what I really typically use this for was sort of a last-ditch effort to save myself, and I would try and put this in life, right? Because trigger ability, you can trash 2 cards from your hand and then add 1 card from top of your deck to the top of your life area. So especially in sort of those final moments where your opponent thinks they're about to win, they hit this as the last card in life. Ideally, you can kind of, fake them out to use up their Dawn, use up all their attacks, and then make it seem like, oh yeah, this is the final hit, or close to the final hit really. And nope, there's 1 more blocker or barrier to go through that's in your way. Very rarely was I using this as a counter because most of my endgame states were me playing giant Big Moms, which cost 10 already. And if it wasn't the 10 cost Big Mom, it was probably the 7 cost Big Mom with the little tech. Well, I don't know if it's tech, but there's another card in the flex cards that would play instead of holding up stuff for counters. And so I originally had this as a 4 of. I think I was seeing too much of it in my hand, and so decided to change it up, put it as a 2, really only looking to use it for its trigger ability. Or if it's like turn 3, I would say, when I'm at 6 Dawn and it's kind of awkward for my deck, I would maybe hold up counters or Dawn for the counter in that case. Alright, next up, moving into the flex cards. So these are cards that you can kind of change if you don't really like the playstyle of it. 3 copies of Shirahoshi, so 5 cost to play, 0 power, but counter plus 1k, so it's nice when in hand, but really, you want to trigger it out of life. So on play, draw 3 cards and trash 2 of them from your hand, and then trigger, play this card. So if I do happen to see in the life, and I'm able to get the Charlotte Linlin ability off, I'll try and put her at the top, especially if I'm like in a okay situation. I'm not gonna get beat up too bad in the next turn. It's good to be able to get the extra cards. Next up on the flex cards, I have Charlotte Katakuri, the secret rare. So this is an 8 cost to play, 8000 power, no counter, but on play, add up to 1 character with a cost of 8 or less to the top or bottom of the owner's life cards face up. Also, can we just take some time to appreciate the artwork of this? This is pretty sick. Anyway, this I would use pretty, well, I would use it in one of two ways. One, I can use it offensively to bounce something, or bounce is not really a bounce ability, but place an opponent's strong character into top or bottom of their life area. Typically, I would also have a 10 cost Big Mom that would be able to follow up afterwards on the next turn, so that I could just straight up like remove it with extra steps from the game. But if you think about Shirahoshi, and a lot of people have caught on to this too, if you had played this out of life, it's on your field, it really does nothing, right? So if you go ahead and play an 8 cost Katakuri, because it doesn't specify that it has to be your opponent that you're targeting, you can actually put Shirahoshi back into life. And I really like that possibility, but honestly, I only pulled one, so I was like, okay, maybe I'll try and use it. I don't want to invest the extra, $50 to $150 to pick up a playset of Katakuri. So I was like, okay, I'll rock one. And honestly, it came up pretty clutch in some moments where there were like blockers in the way. I could bounce them into life and then do the thing I was talking about with the 10 cost Big Mom next turn. So the card was pretty useful. The only thing that I would really be concerned about is finding the right opportunity to play him. And also in my experience, it does seem to work the best when you're healing your own life as opposed to doing it offensively. But if the situation calls for it, do it. Next up, I do have 2 copies of Soul Focus. This is 5 cost to play. Main ability is your opponent chooses 1. Trash 1 card from top of your opponent's life cards, or add 1 card from top of your deck to the top of your life cards, and then trigger, activate this card's main ability. So essentially, this is the 7 cost Big Mom effect. And I really like this in Big Mom because, unlike Katakuri, the other yellow leader, you don't really have a choice in whether you see this in life or not. It's kind of, RNG. But with Big Mom, you can control that RNG a little bit, and if you have it in hand, you can actually place it at the top of your deck. And in an ideal world, you're doing it when you have 3 Dawn, like when it is like the first opportunity for you to activate this ability. You put the Soul Focus in here, then they swing into your life, and now your opponent has to make a choice. And I think the choice does get easier in the end game, right? In the late stages of the match. But in the middle of it, this is a hard choice. Only run 2 copies because anymore, I'm a little concerned that my life might be too filled with it, or my hand might be too filled with it. And I don't have great ways of cycling stuff out and putting it into the trash, except for like the trigger from Akaku Sovereignty. So I really want to see this in the early to mid portion of the match, but anything later is a little rough. Next up, and this is, a choice that I enjoy, I got 4 copies of Zeus. So like I said, I was running the homie package pretty heavily in my testing and things leading up to store championships. Even in one of the store championships, I used it. And one of the things I noticed was, I can protect my homies, right? I can protect my Zeus, my Prometheus by using the stage card. But it wasn't really adding value. It was just protecting, right? But the reason I kept Zeus is because 3 cost of play, 3000 power, counter plus 1k. Activate main, rest this card, and then you can give one of your Charlotte Linlins banish. Your leader, your characters, any of them gets banish. And so what I was talking about earlier was, late stages of the game, right? I've been putting out 10 cost Big Moms. If I think it's finally time for me to go in with it and try and win the game, I'll do, 7 cost Big Mom. I still have 3 Dawn. Throw down Zeus. Give one of the 10 cost Big Moms banish. And then kind of force my opponent to make some decisions whether they want to let that go through, or if I need to kill like a pretty prominent blocker, and I'm pretty sure that they're forced to block, I'll put banish on the Charlotte Linlin, and then I'll try and force them to block the attack. Now, does it leave the cloud exposed afterwards? For sure, right? But honestly, and in all honesty, I think that's fine, right? Because that is one less attack that your opponent is swinging into your life. And especially if they try and do something with lower cost characters, or not lower cost, but lower power characters, you could still counter out it. Now, could you ignore it like a lot of people have figured out to just ignore Prospero until it becomes really problematic? Sure. But you want me to swing like 9k banish with my leader, who you can't kill? That is why I like Zeus. Of all the homies, he stayed. And then last but not least, I want to talk about 2 single cards that I put in here. Debating about some of it, but I have the 2 cost blocker, so 2 cost 2,000 power, counter plus 1k. Charlotte Galette has blocker keyword. And then I have a vanilla 6k, so 4 cost to play, 6,000 power, counter plus 1k. Vanilla. The thought process was, I do like the 6,000 power threshold for a lot of matchups, especially against red, where a lot of their KO abilities are 5,000, 4,000, stuff like that. I know they have a jet pistol, but they're going to waste a jet pistol on Charlotte Opera. I don't know. That said, in all of my matches, he's never really come up. I've really just used him as a counter. Honestly, the card that came up more was this one. So blocker, just having more blockers in general is nice. Sure, can it be KO'd by effects? Absolutely. Is your opponent going to want to use its like expensive effects or effects in general to try and KO this? No. And so, potentially I might just swap out Opera for another Galette, just to see how that runs. But honestly, just having more counters and just more bodies to throw onto the board, especially in the early parts where I'm trying to, survive until I get to my big moms, it's really nice. So there you have it. There is my Charlotte Linlin deck list. What do y'all think? Honestly, Big Mom is super fun. I really love the ability to, kind of control what is in my life, take my life into my own hands. Very inspirational. And overall, I think it's a fun deck, right? I think it's a fun deck that does get OP04 support, but I won't spoil ending now because that's not what you came here for. And then really quickly, just to talk about the strategies of it, pretty much early game is trying to keep at 3 or more life until I get into sort of my 7 cost Big Mom range, or even my 10 cost Big Mom range if I can help it, right? Try and counter, try and heal as much as possible. Use Soul Pocus, use the Ikaku Sovereignty at turn 3 when I have 6 Dawn, or 5 Dawn, I guess, depending on if I'm going first or second, right? But really, and I think this is true for any yellow deck, you're really trying to just kind of keep pace in terms of your life count, life totals with your opponent. And then I would say that the hardest matchup I've noticed, besides Dofi, which I think it's just my brain can't think of Dofi things, but Red is obviously a huge one, especially if they aggro you pretty early, because it kind of plays counter to that whole, keep in even range with my opponent's life. But in that sense, if I can see my Prosperos, I'll be a lot more aggressive with it, because I think the general convention or wisdom of yellow is to leave up your attackers and kind of just do the counter attacks when it's necessary. And I think for a lot of decks that is, true, that is good. In red, just swing. Especially like the sort of cheap, 1 cost spam Zoros. They take up a lot of Dawn to get up to 5, right? So they need to invest a lot to try and KO your Prospero, and you can counter out of it so that you can keep him up and then keep swinging with 5k. And then from there, you can just hopefully have your big moms kind of cascade through, and then just have a huge final turn with 2 or 3 big moms out on the board. Now in the mirror matchup, or like the other yellow decks matchup, it really kind of feels like a race to find your 10 cost big moms, and then also who goes second, essentially. So yeah, there are certainly a lot of tough matchups with this, but I had a really fun time utilizing the Big Mom. I think after this round of store championships, and maybe after the Gen Con regionals, maybe I'll retire the Big Mom. But I think my next deck that I'm going to be trying to perfect is Kuro, maybe? Question mark? I don't know. Let me know what you think about what deck I should build. Kuro seems interesting, seems fun, especially with the new ban list, or restricted list, I guess, that came out. That's going to happen July 28th, so pretty soon after, as of the date of this recording. I think Kuro's got a chance. A lot of people have been saying Katakuri, and I understand that completely. Now, for all the Zoro players out there, y'all aren't hit too bad, because here's a deck list that did not originally run the 4 cost blockers. Was that a mistake? At the time when I put it out, maybe. Now, it's looking pretty good.